So, what does this have to do with information systems? Well, as I mentioned before, a business is like a living organism. It needs to sense what's going on within its environment so that it can adapt to changing conditions within the environment in order to continue to survive, okay, and in order to grow and prosper. So, businesses sense their environment by performing a variety of tests, and one is probably best known as the SWOT test, or SWOT analysis. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Okay. Now the first two, strengths and weaknesses, are an internal examination. From a business perspective, what do we do well? What do we not do so well? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? They're internal factors. They're things over which the company can make changes to improve. Okay. Then there are the opportunities and threats. Now, opportunities and threats are presented by external forces. There's a new product that comes to market, such as for the digital camera, the smartphone. Okay, that's a threat. Opportunities. Apple saw an opportunity to move away from the computer business, which it had not been doing particularly well, to move into consumer electronics. So they came out with the iPod, and then later the iPhone, and yet again the iPad. They have redefined themselves, so much so that in the year 2006 or 2007, Apple officially changed their name from Apple Computer Incorporated to simply Apple Incorporated. So let's talk about threats, and let's talk about opportunities, because a business has to sense the environment it's operating in. And that's where Michael Porter's 5 forces model comes into play. Okay, and you've read about that, so let's run through those very quickly. It doesn't matter, they're not in any particular order. I'll simply begin with supplier power. Okay, supplier power is where, from your business's perspective, you have a supplier. Perhaps there's only one supplier of a component or service or something that you need, and you can't get that anywhere else. Okay, that, in other words, they pretty much have you over the barrel. They have you at a disadvantage. It could be that there are only a few suppliers of whatever that raw material is, or whatever that is, whatever that service is that you need. Okay, but there aren't many suppliers. You don't have many choices. Generally speaking, in an environment like that, where they're not having a lot of competition between each other, there's nothing to force prices down. So if supplier power is strong, you're at something of a disadvantage. The flip of that is buyer power. Okay, now buyer power, if you have buyer power, that means that you can go to any number of suppliers. There are lots of suppliers out there, and so it's a buyer's market. You can go to supplier A, you can go to supplier B, you can negotiate, you can play each other off, against one another, and you can and negotiate hard for a good price. Okay, and that's great for you. But if your market is such where your customers have buyer power, in other words, for instance, you are a fast food outlet, McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Popeyes, KFC, Taco Bell, Arby's, Chick-fil-A, and it goes on and on and on. You have your customers have buyer power because they don't have to buy those hamburgers from you. They can go somewhere else. There are very few people who have a strong preference one way or the other when they're looking for fast food. Okay, so if that's the case, then you're at a disadvantage again. So if you have buyer power, that's a good thing. If your customers have buyer power, strong buyer power, or the way we look at it is the market is such that customers have strong buyer power, then you're at a disadvantage. Okay, the third is threat of substitutes. The threat of substitute services or products. tablet computers over laptops. That is a reason why once Apple came out with the iPad, I don't know if you remember when that first happened, but there were a lot of people, the head of Microsoft was just deriding the iPad, saying, well, that's just silly. No one's going to want to buy that. And then Apple sold millions in the first year. And Microsoft and a number of others looked at that and said, maybe we were wrong there. Okay, maybe we were wrong. And worse than that, they realized that people were buying tablets instead of buying laptop computers or notebooks. And that put a little bit of a scare in other companies. Okay, we've seen that in other industries as well. Okay, if gasoline prices get too high again, you're going to see sales of, say, large vehicles, SUVs, will decline again, and small fuel-efficient cars sales will pick up. Substitute products. Okay. So we've talked about supplier power, buyer power, substitute products. Let's talk about just rivalry. Okay. Rivalry occurs when within any given market there are a lot of suppliers. Okay, you may say, well, wait a second, isn't that, then we already talked about that. We talked about that in terms of buyer power, right? That the customer has a lot of options. The two kind of go hand in hand. Okay, the rivalry is, you have multiple players. Okay, the products are pretty much the same, so you're going to have to come up with some other way to compete. Okay, think about soft drinks. Okay, you've got Coca-Cola, you've got Pepsi-Cola, you've got RC Cola, you've got the generic brands. Okay, your Food Lion or Lowe's Foods or their own brands, and there are plenty of in different parts of the country. You have small regional bottlers as well. Okay, there can be a lot of players there. Or if you even want to go even further, you can just look at something as mundane as machine screws. Okay, there's really nothing to differentiate buying a machine screw that's been produced by company X as opposed to company Y. Okay, and there are probably literally thousands of companies that are churning out machine screws worldwide. Okay, so you've got this rivalry going on within the marketplace, and you're going to have to find some way to compete against everyone else. Okay. Okay, the last of these is threat of new entrants. Okay, and that's ENTRANTS. Okay, entrants meaning new players coming into the marketplace. Okay, how easy is it for someone to look at whatever you're doing and say, that's a great business idea, I'm going to do the same thing, and worse than that, it costs them virtually nothing to start that business. Okay, setting up websites. Okay, lots of hosting services out there. It really doesn't cost a whole lot of money to get your foot in the door. Other examples might be, for instance, just starting a restaurant. Okay, how easy is it to start? I'm not saying that it's easy to do that, but comparatively speaking, if you want to start a business, starting a restaurant can be pretty straightforward. You can make a decision today, and 2 months from now you'll be opening on Main Street somewhere. Threat of new entrants, how easy is it? There are other businesses like a bank, okay, that's heavily regulated by government, and therefore not only do you need to have a large collection of capital to open a bank, you have to have lots of funds available. You also have to deal quite a bit with government regulation. Okay, so it's not just the cost of startup. There are all these other things come into play that makes it difficult for new banks to start. I'm not saying that they don't start, but frankly, I would think that a significant number of the banks that are in place today have been in place for a long while, and that's because it's difficult to start a new bank. Okay, so threat of new entrants. So here are the 5 again. You've got your supplier power, buyer power, rivalry, threat of substitute products and services, threat of new entrants.